Okay, welcome to learning how to use a slab roller. I'm going to show you in this video how to prepare clay and then how to take it over to the slab roller and create a really nice consistent slab. So what I need to do first is to demonstrate how to prepare material. The best thing that you want to do while thinking about the construction of your vessel shape is to make a slab that is large enough so you can make all of your pieces from that slab. The consistency of the material will help the survivability in the drying and firing process. If you have inconsistent material such as thin to thick or soft to hard, that can create warping and cracking later on in the process. So using a slab roller that will compress the material into a really consistent slab is going to really be beneficial for the survivability of these projects, especially if you're making larger pieces. So with that said, normally what I'll do is I'll take a big piece of clay like this and I'll wedge it up and I'll try to make it as consistent as possible. But for you guys, this wedging a piece of clay this size is probably not reasonable. And so what you would do is you could take smaller pieces like this, all right, and we can join them. And if you use this technique, then we could make a slab as large as we need to run it through the slab machine. So first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wedge this material up, make sure that it's consistent. I get all the air bubbles out. And what I want to do is just try to create like a consistent rectangular shape first. Okay, there we go. There's one. Alright, and then I'll do the next one here. Okay, wedge this up. And that's good for now. Okay, I'd probably wedge it a little bit more, but try to make this short and sweet. Okay, you definitely want to take a moment to make sure that you don't have any air pockets and that things are consistent in thickness as best you can. That just helps when you run it through the slab roller to keep your shape more rectangular or square. Because we're going to be making vessel shapes that are geometric, the most efficient way to use your material, especially when we run it through the slab roller, is to keep it rectangular or square. So you just want to be mindful of your shape that you're constructing at this part of the process. All right, here we go. So I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit. The other thing too is you don't want to stretch it out too thin. See how thick this is? I've got about an inch or so. Because we want to run this through the slab roller where it compresses the material. So if we have something that's too thin, then you're not going to get that compression. You're not going to get a really strong bond that the machine creates. So you want to leave it a little bit on the thicker side, like an inch, inch and a half. Not too thick, because you could actually damage the machine. So it's kind of a happy medium. It's a sweet spot. Okay, so in order to join these two pieces together, what I want to do is I just want to kind of taper two edges. See? All right, see how I do that? Okay, and then what I can do is I'll just stick those two edges together and I'll create a really nice bond there. Now what you don't want to do is smack it so hard that you're pushing it into the table. But you do want to create enough force so that you get rid of the seam that's created from joining the two pieces. Okay, the next part is you're going to want to flip this over and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, Now, one more thing you want to look out for is, see this little shape here where the seam joins? If you don't create a consistent shape there, that will form a crack. It could cause a weak spot and form a crack and continue to crack the whole way down your slab when it dries. So what I usually do is just kind of beef that up and make sure that I get a really good bond there. Okay, and maybe to the other side as well, just double check my seams, and I'm ready to go. So now that I have this more rectangular shape that's pretty consistent, okay, I'm ready to go to the slab roller. All right. Okay, welcome to part 2. This is the slab roller. This is the actual machine that you guys will be using. Just want to point out a couple of things. You can see that there's these 2 drums right here. That's what spins around and compresses the material and spits it out on the other side. Okay. There's also a thickness adjuster, and there's a little measuring stick over here, and that will help you determine how thick or thin your slab can be. You can adjust the thickness from this knob here. You can turn it either way to raise it and lower it. Normally I have it set to a position that is pretty reasonable for what we're going to be doing in class. So typically you're not really going to have to adjust it unless you're doing something more custom, and then we can talk about it and maybe work together until you get more familiar with the machine. All right. The other thing I'd like to point out is when we're using this machine, there's a particular direction. You always go from this side through to that side. Always. You never bring it back through. Okay? You could actually pop the gears apart in here and break the machine. There's a lot of pressure that gets applied to the material, so we want to make sure that we're always going in this direction. The other thing too is that you want to make sure that the drums are clean. Sometimes clay might get mixed up in the drums, and if there's like little bits of clay on there, we're going to have to clean that off, because every time the drum rolls around, it will print a little hole into your slab, which is not ideal. Okay, now in order to prevent clay from sticking to the drums, I have these 2 pieces of canvas that you'll run your material, that you'll sandwich your material through. And so what we want to do, you can see how it was always right up here. We always fold it up and put it right back there so that people can continuously use it. All right, now, one of the things I do want to make a quick note is that when this gets used a lot, the canvas will absorb a lot of material from the clay. So sometimes in order to prevent your slab from sticking to it, you'll have to like flip it, or maybe leave it air dry for a couple of minutes before you use it again. Typically there's not enough usage in normal studio practice that we don't have to worry about that, but I do want to point that out. Okay, so first things first, what I want to do is, you can see how I line up both of these pieces of canvas here. And I just kind of want to prime the slab roller first. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that these are together and that they're straight. And I just want to get this through the machine first. It will help later. One of the things you need to be careful of is that these drums are steel. Okay? You need to be really careful of your fingers here. It's very easy to pinch your fingers, and you can really hurt yourself. So just please be mindful of where your appendages are when you're using this machine. Now, what I'm going to do is, I seem to be, primed and ready. So I'm just going to take this top flap and just lay it over. Okay, and I've got my slab here, all ready to go. Now, one of the things I want to point out is, we want to create a slab that's usable. So what I don't want is like a really long, skinny, narrow slab, right? That's not really going to help us. unless we're making some giant fettuccine. What I would recommend is that you can see here, I've got this slab, and I know that I'm going to make a vessel that's at least, maybe 13 or 14 inches tall. So what I want to do is create that dimension, and then when I run it through this way, it will create a really long slab. Okay, that is the height that I need. All right, so you just want to be mindful of the geometry of what you're making, as well as the relationship, proportional relationship with what you're feeding through. So typically what I'll do, you also want to keep it straight, right? So if it's not straight and it goes in sideways or diagonal, it'll create this like amoeba shape, which you want to prevent. So you want to keep things lined up so that we're using our materials as efficiently as possible. The other thing that you want to watch out for is making sure that there aren't any creases in your canvas. If you run this through and there's a fold in the canvas, it will create a crease in your material, which then would probably lead to cracking and warping. All right, so I'm all lined up. I'm ready to go. I'm just going to take this, all right, and line this up, get it snug up against the drum, everything's straight, I'm ready to rock. Now, something that I want to explain to you is when you're feeding this through, the tables aren't exactly level, so you want to make sure that you guide the first part of the slab up and over onto the wood table, okay? The other thing is that when you start pushing it through with the wheel, you don't want to stop. What can happen is if you stop in the middle of compressing your slab, it might leave like a little indent. Okay, and that indent can cause a crack or warping later on in the drying and firing process. So just be aware of that. Usually you guys will team up, partners. One can guide the slab and another one can do the wheel. I'm pretty familiar with it. It takes a lot of pressure. You'll be surprised at that. So, when you guys are learning this, you just probably want to team up so that you're not wasting your time and your material. If you do, create a dent or something, I'd suggest that you start over. Okay, so here we go. So I'm just going to pull this through, and once I start, it's going to compress that slab, and I'm just going to kind of guide it up and over, and yay! Okay, and there we go. All right, I'm going to show you what this looks like in the next segment, okay? Here we are, I've just rolled out my slab, and I just want to show you how to prep your slab, things to look for, and how to move it. All right, so first things first, you want to inspect your slab and make sure that there aren't any little air bubbles. You'll see them. They'll literally form little bubbles on the surface of your material. Okay? The next thing, if you see a little air pocket, you can just take a needle tool and just kind of pop it, and then you can kind of compress it down. You want to make sure that you get rid of all your air pockets. That could run into problems later. You could have some cracking, or it could perhaps blow up in the kiln. We don't get a lot of blow-ups here, but you just want to prevent any type of malfunction going forward. Okay, the other thing too is you want to look at your edges. If you have a lot of like cracks in your edges, you want to make sure that you cut that away. As this slab stiffens up, which is what we're going to do, these little cracks will continue to crack the whole way across your slab. So you just want to take a knife right now and you just kind of want to cut those away. You want to get underneath all of the cracks to eliminate them from your material. Okay? And whoops. All right, you can kind of see that, right? See all these like little cracks right there? You want to get those away. All right. I'm going to do that to the top side as well. And I'm ready to go. Now, One of the other things that I want you to be conscious of is that there's a texture from the canvas that gets applied to the surface. I want you to scrape that texture away. I don't want you guys using canvas texture. It might look really interesting now, but as you move forward and you're considering your surfaces, it would appear to be an oversight. I would recommend that you start smooth, and what you can do is get like a little scraper, and then you can scrape your material smooth, okay? The next step then, well, let me just back up. I will say that obviously you can print stuff into your materials. So what I've had students do before is like maybe they have some other piece of fabric or some other flexible pattern maker that they would put on their slab and then run it through. I've had students use towels and things like that to get like a texture or an impression. So you're definitely welcome to do that stuff. If you do bring your own towel in though, I want to work with you to make sure that we're setting up the machine right and that we're getting a good result. Okay? Alright, now, next thing we want to do is we need to get this material off of the canvas. Alright, so I got a little trick. What I'll have is a piece of plastic, a big one, and all I'll do is make sure that it's connected on there, okay? It's nice and flat. And what I want to do is I can just kind of flip this slab and lay it on this side, and then I can peel away the canvas. Alright, so I'm just going to do that. This takes a little bit of practice. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to kind of hold it like this with my hands, like kind of pancake it. And I'm just going to flip it. Woo! Now, before you take this canvas away, you don't want to just rip it off. Okay, if the canvas is wet and it really compressed into the canvas, then you can tear your slab. So my recommendation is to, come straight back off of the slab, at like 180 degrees. All right, and just kind of peel it away. That will ensure the survivability. Okay, and then again, I would inspect for cracks, or I would inspect for air bubbles. Okay, if you have cracks or air bubbles, you want to address those. If you have a crack, you can take a scraping tool and just kind of smooth that out. All right. The other thing I want you to do is get rid of the canvas texture. Okay, and again, you can take a scraping tool, like one of these tools right here. All right. You can use the flat edge, and I'll just kind of scrape that really smooth and leave it really clean. Okay. There we go. This is also a good time that if you want to put textures and things into it, you can do that. I might use the serrated side and put a bunch of parallel lines into it, or draw into it. What you want to be careful of though is that you don't penetrate too deep into the surface. That could create a thick and thin area, which could lead to a crack. So you just want to be mindful of how far you're penetrating. I would recommend that you don't penetrate more than halfway through your slab. Other than that, you should be good to go. Okay? Now, the other trick associated with using this plastic is, now what I can do is if I want to store this or move it, I can pick it up by the plastic, okay? And if I want to store it without it drying out, I can just use this plastic and just kind of fold it over there. And now I have this really nice slab that's all ready to go, that's compressed and consistent. That's protected by the plastic, so that if you need to leave and come back, it won't dry out. Okay? So that's the conclusion of learning how to slab roll, and now you should be able to use this machine whenever you want, and I encourage you to do so. It will definitely help your slab stretching woes, so you can have a lot more consistency. I would add, though, that this machine is a luxury item. It's not part of every studio, and so it's still good to maintain those stretching skills that I showed you in the previous project, but regardless, it's a great tool to use and I encourage you to use it. Alright, thanks a lot.